Hello, I'm Hanbyul Shim, a research fellow at SNU Center for Asian Urban Societies. It is my pleasure to participate in this collaborative online presentation, and would like to send congratulations to 2020 Ars Electronica Festival. My topic is the change of global-local relation under the pandemic situation. An instance of which is the way we have this presentation right now, I might say. The organizer in KARS suggested this question to me: how can we remain global under the pandemic situation? I think possible answers to this question would be these two. First, an alternative way of international exchange, which seems to be easily associated with the technical solutions, such as the online conference channel we have now. Second, conditions of new locality in new normal era, which is more likely to suggest changing paradigm that we should refer to. And I would rather say that my presentation is for the second one's theme. We all are witnessing what our reaction to pandemic situation is, as well as untact interaction. There comes a drive that requests more profound paradigm shift indeed, such as reshoring, which means the withdrawal of globally extended supply chain into the domestic territory. Many countries' governments, including India and Korea, that have been sustaining production ability in domestic level, are preparing those policies to advocate locally self-sufficient production and actually boosted the local procurement. Within industrial societies, they mentioned that Industry 4.0 will bring considerable shift, since it will digitize all production processes into unmanned ones, according to the premises that unmanned plant would be an alternative in pandemic situation. Most of all, these all drives converge into the concept relocalization, the inverse shift against globalization. If I may, I would like to call it reactive localism to the pandemic. I think this inverse drive can be used as a political hegemonic leverage that tries to shift existing economic relations from globalized one to the local one. But it would not be so simple as much as tipping a dish to abandon globally extended network. The current pandemic situation may well change the configuration or division of global and local indeed. And I also agree on the importance of intensifying local resilience. But my point is that reactive localization could be led to flawed pathway, because it easily suggests the premise that there is local independent subject. But the reality is not that way. Even anyone who has no international connections suffer from the pandemic situation. Especially we know that there are lots of stories about vulnerable groups in local society suffering from the local lockdown. So I dare say there is a large gap between the reactive localization and the reality. This is the well-known border between Malaysia and Singapore, through which millions of commuters have been traveling to the workplace of opposite side. We can easily imagine the border is actually an essential link that sustains our ordinary life. And I would like to emphasize the fact that it has been that way from long, long ago, even before the concept of globalization had come up. Actually, globalization is a relatively following concept that is valid with modern nations that established the border for its own territory. For the commuters who have the collective memory of long history before the nations, conceptual division of global and local or global versus local is useless at all. The border is just an artificial hurdle laid within their lived space for themselves. I would say that global and local are just different facets of one entity. At least in our ordinary life or our lived space, dichotomy of global versus local is absurd. To the contrary, we should understand it is a pairing concept with mutual dependency or the same phenomenon. There are lots of instances that prove this point, the sense of real world in which dichotomy of global versus local became meaningless. This is the scene of a famous place called Multicultural Village of Wonggok-dong in Ansan, Korea. You can see the vibrance of this neighborhood in this photo. The neighborhood used to be the residential area of Korean laborers who worked in a large historical industrial complex called Banwolgongdan in the 1980s developing period of Korea. Now it's a real lived space which is inherited to the new laborers as borderless neighborhood. They now elect their representative with voluntary vote and make themselves mingled and united themselves into one community. In this perspective of our ordinary life experience, it goes like this diagram, I think. If the globalization in the past were real or not, we live the era of localized globalness, so to speak. Now, it is requested that we should sustain our ordinary life, let's say, in a new way because of the pandemic situation. In my perspective, it is not the problem of choice between global and local. It is the urbanity that is really challenged and is at risk by the pandemic. Pandemic situation keeps rejecting all the features that comprises the urban. Density and connections, the virtue of which are possibilities from coincidences given by the urban. Also, it eliminates interactions or decreases its frequencies, and also it puts negative impacts on flows of goods and objects, information and knowledge, and human mobility also. So I would say the fundamental threat from the pandemic is anti-urban. Then our question can be changed to this, I suppose. How could we recover the urban? Nonetheless, the pandemic goes on. Though I do not know the full answer, I would say that we should discover and preserve our diversity and inclusiveness within our lived space, because those are essentially the urban. I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for your listening.
Hi, this is Eunseon Park from Listen to the City. Actually, I studied art and urban planning, especially environmental planning and disaster management. Listen to the City is an art urbanism research collective started in 2009. We consist of urban researchers, designers, filmmakers, and activists, etc. Our membership is quite flexible. So we actually take very diverse forms of tactics according to the themes, according to the events. So we work with many art institutions, but however, we are more interested in how we could listen to the people or being that are ignored by the society. So we research and make books and make films, but more often design direct actions such as press conferences, tours, and rallies, etc. Our goal is transitioning from unsustainable city to sustainable city. For that, focus on the commons. Among the commons, we focus on space and land because I think violence always starts from the spaces and territories. The transition is not just about class, but also about culture and gender. Thus, feminist standpoint and epistemologies are very important point to plan our activities. So we have our own research questions. Who owns the commons? And what are the commons? And what Listen to the Cities should do to make commons belong to everybody? Who are the people without voices and where are they? And what is periphery of the city? So how we connect to the feminist insurgent planning. So commons is quite simple concept. Actually, that means that natural and cultural resources that are accessible to everyone. So it doesn't need to be, it should be free for everyone, but corrupted society, neoliberal society actually make the commons as private. So which makes a lot of problems. I will skip about sustainable city. For transition the society, we need a multi-level perspective, which is, we call it as niche and regime and landscape level. So to make whole transition, you need to start from niche and then change the policy level and the nation level. So for transition from A to B, actually you need infrastructure and cultural symbolic meaning and industrial networks and techno-scientific knowledges and sectoral policies and markets, etc. But the most important thing is actually changing of the culture. So from our unsustainable culture that now happening for like global warming or wasting a lot of resources, and to change this, actually we need to change a lot of things, not just one. That's why we work on so many levels. What we do, actually we publicize the problem of the commons that privatized by the private companies and the nations. And we wanted to publicize the problem. And we are empowering the voiceless people. And we make questions about real estate-oriented nation and recording the history of the commoners and the people who resist to the unsustainable system. So this is rather close to distribution of the sensible referred by Jacques Lanchier, which means that so this is not very close to traditional art, but this is more about equality in participation in the society. So we keep questioning who can participate in the society and the politics. Through see the images of our work practice, I wanted to explain about what we're doing. So Listen to the City started in 2009. We started from making magazines called Urban Drawings. So first one, we made this magazine to talk about Eunseon tragedy, which was a redevelopment project designed by Daniel Libeskin and planned by Seoul City and the government. And so it's still going on. It's a really big project. And during the eviction to make this project, 6 people get killed. So which was really shocking for me, and it became kind of motivation to make Listen to the City and alternative urban magazine. So second one was about river problems. So we made a magazine about nature and humanism to make human comfort. We exploiting nature constantly. So this issue was about nature and exploitation of the nature. And we started Seoul tours since 2010 to talk about how the government and developers exploiting the riverside and the city. So we made a tour logo like this, which is pretty cute, I think. And we made a tour at the Cheonggyecheon area and Dongdaemun area as well. We wanted to show this old city tissue because we wanted to say that we needed some diversity in the city, because in the city we only allowed this kind of high rises all the time. So I think this is a really big problem. So we need a diversity in the city about housing and the way of life and about the job. So we needed to use our city space as we wanted to. So this is a Cheonggyecheon tour, which is a very popular tour course. So we start from Cheonggyecheon 1가 and to Cheonggyecheon 8가. So actually this project is famous for sustainable city planning project, but which is not true, because this river covered by rubber actually, and then they covered with concrete, and then they put some stone on it. So this is a really big fish tanks, not really real water. So this is not recovery of nature, nor recovery of the history. So they meant to recover this bridge, but they didn't, and they evicted a lot of street vendors. We estimate at least 10,000 people were evicted at the time, just for 7 months' time. So eviction was really brutal. So Listen to the City made a tour about it, and this is a sewer water, because this project designed really badly. So they, when it rains hard a lot, some people isolated because the sewer gate is opening automatically. But not many people know about this because the city wants to keep it as a secret. So we made an open street map together with the people. Like, this is a kind of collective map with the citizens that we went to the river, and we tried to find where the sewers and where is the escape ladders. So we check it with the people, which was a workshop in 2018. So we used the open street map. And then this is a Cheonggyecheon gentrification map project which we done with evictee from 2003. So he used to be a street vendor, and he is one of the activists to anti-gentrification in this area. So he grew up in this area. So we made the map based on memories, that how he used this area when he was young, and we made a map based on memory. And she's the one of the evicted from 2007 when Dongdaemun Design Park were made. So she became a street vendor in 2000 when we had IMF. So she talked about her experiences as a street vendor. And actually gentrification is still happening in Cheonggyecheon area, in Eujiro area. So I made a team called Eujiro Cheonggyecheon Anti-Gentrification Alliance. So artists and researchers, designers gather together and to try to fix the problems. So firstly, we record the history of the area, and we researching about the industrial connection between the workers. These workers averagely working for 33 years in this area. So over This year, about 1,000 people will get evicted in this area, and the whole Ulchiro and Cheonggyecheon area, there will be about 60,000 people will be evicted in 10 years. So this is a very critical problem. So this is critically showing that, anyway, this country has no values except real estate value. So they have a right to work inside of the city. But the government and city government, they don't allow these people working inside of city, which is very stupid, I think. This is a really anti-historical movement at the moment. So they are going to get rid of this city tissue, and they are going to build this ugly apartment. So we do many rallies and demonstrations to prevent this project, and still negotiating with the city all the time. And nextly, I wanted to talk about gentrification in the Naeseong River. The government started Naeseong River project in 2009. It was a part of Four River restoration project, but which wasn't real restoration because the river was clean and nice before, but the government destroyed it, like Cheonggyecheon area. But as Cheonggyecheon is about just the gentrification, this project also linked to gentrification in the rural side. And we don't need that many dams, but the government is just keep making dams at the riverside. And one of them is Yeongju Dam. This is the dam site. And this beautiful river destroyed like this in a year, and then they cut a lot of trees. My colleagues and I saw many trees are dying, and diversity of the nature just disappearing. So for making dams, they not just destroying the river, they destroy the forest as well. So this is before the construction, and then now it became like this, and now it's submerged by the dam. This is one of the trees that cut down by the dam construction. So this is the last image of today's lecture. As you see, this mountain used to be a very beautiful mountain with owls. A lot of birds used to live there, and which is completely destroyed. So I wanted to ask to everyone that why we choose this kind of society. In our society, all the value system has been crushed, I think. People think that we don't need to change nature, and they destroy the place to work, and then they destroy to water to drink. People destroy the forest that we need to breathe. We should ask to ourselves that what we want and what is our value. So the only value in South Korea is now a real estate market. If the market crashes, and then our society will have very hard time, I think. So we need to change it, or we need to change it from this unsustainable society to sustainable society. And we need to think about what we want, I think.
As an architect, I'm supposed to talk about the possibility of architecture that can be a medium to integrate knowledge for dealing with complex issues we are facing currently. When studying at Cornell, I became interested in Tuvalu and started collecting relevant data after reading an article about the country that would disappear due to sea level rise. In 2011, I visited there as I received research funding from the school. Most of the data in this presentation were produced based on documents received from the Tuvalu government and international organizations at the time of the visit, as well as information available from the internet. We tried to specify all the sources in the Tuvalu project books, but if there is anything omitted, please email us. We will update it. Tuvalu is one of 14 Oceanian countries in Southern Pacific Ocean, located midway between Australia and Hawaii. The island nations here about 1 to 2 hours away each other in flight time. This distance isolation causes many issues, especially for small island nations like Tuvalu. Tuvalu consists of 9 islands lying on the line of approximately 500 kilometers. Of these, 6 are coral atolls and 3 are reef islands. It has a population of about 10,000, making it the 3rd smallest country in the world. The capital of Tuvalu, Funafti, is a transport, administration, trade, and financial center. More than 55% of the population lives in Funafti, and Tuvalu project focuses on here as a representative of the 9 islands. The undersea map and the model of Funafti shows the topography of the shallow lagoon inside and the deep ocean outside of the atoll. As such, the island has 2 sides with different characteristics. For example, ocean side receives wave power energy 6 times stronger than the lagoon side. This is the central area of Funafti. The flow of population from the outer islands has increased since most opportunities such as higher education and employment are available. It has a tropical climate with mean air temperature of 30 degrees Celsius. Funafti is a transport hub home to international airport and seaport. The country relies heavily on imports, and cargoes arrived here is distributed to each island by vessels. As the biggest open space with hard surface, an airfield functions as a central park of Funafti, where island people enjoy sports or leisure time, except for 2 short moments a week when it serves airplanes from and to Fiji. The lively community fabric is located on the lagoon side from an airfield. On the ocean side, there are infrastructures supporting community fabric, including power plant. Tuvalu is often classified as an extremely vulnerable country. The various crises that threaten its sustainability can be classified into 2 categories depending on where their origins come from. First, climate change. Second, internal crisis. The reason Tuvalu is sensitive to sea level rise is that its topography is low and flat. Most of the territory is formed at a height of 4.2 meters or less, and the entire population lives at a height of 2 meters or less above the sea level. Already Tuvalu is experiencing a flood of seawater when king tide occurs every 1 or 2 years. More than half of territory is flooded, and this continues to threaten food cultivation system by salinating soils. This shows tropical cyclone Pam that hit Tuvalu in 2015. The government of Tuvalu has continuously kept appealing to the international society to take an actual action immediately for addressing climate change issues. Domestic crisis. Tuvalu needs to develop alternative and sustainable government revenue resources to improve its current structure of rental income based on assets that are not productive capabilities. As shown in the components of GDP, government employment generates about its 1/3. They are the only jobs in the island that pay a steady salary. It is a critical issue for the future of Tuvalu how to sustain the growing numbers of young Tuvaluans who wish a more affluent lifestyle than older generations. Besides the fact that the most parts of the country remain pristine, the number of tourists does not exceed 200 per year. Increased soil salinization and natural disasters are directly affecting Tuvalu's traditional cultivation system and food security. Due to the shortage of locally produced crops, many residents consume processed food imported from other countries, leading to an increase in diseases such as diabetes and heart disease. Because of the scarcity of domestic resources, the population relies heavily on imports in terms of foods and other daily necessities. As a result, it causes a huge trade deficit. The recent population growth and high dependence on imported goods have resulted in a huge increase in waste. Without proper treatment process, the waste leachate flows into the sea. Its environmental impact on water quality and coral ecosystems is a serious problem. Human sewage systems and pig breeding systems have the same issue on water pollution. As there is no surface water source in Tuvalu, it heavily depends on rainwater. The shortage of water source is serious, and in 2011, a national emergency was declared after a severe drying period. Also, it is urgently required to develop sustainable energy sources. Through this research, I planned the Tuvalu project with the following concepts. Tuvalu is an organic body. The crises faced by Tuvalu are complex and huge systems in which individual issues are interconnected. In order to address this, the details must first be simplified and enlarged to be dealt separately. A process then required to zoom out again to build a relationship between each issue to define a reality of complexity. The scope of knowledge required to this process is extremely broad. Therefore, a spectrum of collective knowledge and opinions, not a few individuals, is essential. For this reason, the project should take an open format that can be updated by public participation. The accumulated floating knowledge is connected with one another and united as one architectural scenario. This is embodied by being settled on the actual site of Tuvalu. The project aims to make Tuvalu a virtual platform where individual knowledge of the 21st century can be gathered and integrated for the issues we face newly. The issues a nation of 10,000 people has can be applied to other cities in whole or in part. This is a web platform of Tuvalu project. From this site, anyone can download 3 PDF books for free: fact, photo, and scenario book. The scenario book consists of 2 parts: expanding archive and alternative Tuvalu scenario. The expanding archive categorizes the issues that need to be addressed for Tuvalu's sustainability and accumulates applicable technologies and practices. Alternative Tuvalu scenario coordinates the individual alternatives gathered in the archive and apply it to the whole Tuvalu as one integrated system. As the archive expands, the options of the scenario increase as well, and each is represented by architectural diagrams and drawings. Expanding archive is divided into 9 categories as follows. Readers can participate in the project depending on their interests by sending relevant materials from the internet or their own ideas to Tuvalu project. The blankets with the notation to be added are to be filled with the participation of readers. Security in territory, such as seawall, beach nourishment, or radical exodus against sea level rise. food from land with the question of how Tuvalu can produce sufficient food again on salinated soils. Food from sea. That explores the possibilities for the sea as another arable area of Tuvalu. Livestock farming. Water production, such as desalination of seawater. Energy production from natural resources. Sustainable transportation, like solar-powered vessels. Waste management. And new sources of revenue, for example, introduction of online business. Alternative Tuvalu scenario is a series of scenarios in which all resources are from expanding archives. Each of these provides an opportunity to look at the alternative possibilities of Tuvalu from an integrated perspective. At the same time, it aims to work as a catalyst for raising discussion for generating other versions of the scenario by being broken through critical feedbacks. To fulfill this role, Alternative Tuvalu 1 was composed as simply and incompletely as possible. In principle, each element sits, functions, and produces in the environment of Tuvalu and promotes the functions of other elements or protects them from potential crisis. The index marks indicate which parts of the archive have become the resource to complete the scenario. Alternative Tuvalu 1 requires different kinds of infrastructures, among which the seawall plays a pivotal role that integrates all facilities into one body. This concept applies to Funafti Island. In response to the rise in sea level, beach nourishment is formed on the lagoon side, and sea walls are built on the ocean side. Infrastructures are located towards the ocean centered on the airfield, while community is located on the lagoon side so that the relationship between the lagoon and the daily life of the community can be maintained. From this narrative, a seawall on the ocean side absorbs and distributes produced energy and resources through each infrastructure and community like arteries and veins. The infrastructures are docked on the seawall to store its products and byproducts in and distribute them to other facilities and communities. Branches were introduced for efficient local transfer of resources. This shows beach nourishment on the lagoon side against the sea level rise. The scenario has 5 phases according to water level and the degree of urgency. Nourishing territory. The scenario starts with protecting and improving the territory that is the foundation of whole narratives. Nourishing life. In the next phase, the food production and tourism industry are activated based on the territory, water, and construction materials that have been improved and produced since the first phase. Sea and energy boosting. In the third phase, the height of the storm ridge in the remaining dangerous areas is raised, and the focus is on the utilization of the sea and the growth of energy production. In closing, if the sea level rises steadily and reaches the dangerous level, it will begin a long process of enclosing all seasides of Funafti Island through beach nourishment and sea walls. Exodus. The island is closed to the outside through phase 4, but all the structures inside are integrated together by docking of infrastructures into sea walls and branches extended from them. One day, as the sea level rises so much that Tuvalu can't stand any further, the inhabitants of the remaining 8 islands start to prepare for exodus to Funafti Island. The completed map of Alternative Tuvalu 1 reminds us of the interior of a huge ocean liner that moored in the middle of South Pacific. It shows the contradictory scene where each part running constantly while maintaining stillness. These 4 cross-sectional drawings of Funafti Island, which have a very long width in reality, illustrate every content of the scenario. I think the most crucial thing about this black and white drawing is that collective knowledge dealing with specific issues is imbued with the medium of architecture and settled on specific sites. As a result, architectural drawing has a single discordant voice. Thank you very much.